Welcome to Deep Look, Ulti World's live weekly show about the current state of Ultimate. I am senior editor Keith Rayner, and I am joined by D1 college editor, Athens-based reporter, and all-around good guy, Edward Stevens, friend of the show. Maybe that's the proper term at this point, but joining us again here in lieu of Charlie Eisenhood is Edward Stevens. Glad to have you back on, Edward.
Glad to be back. I always appreciate that you never mention my bad qualities in these intros.
Where are they? I haven't found them.
I have a rug in the next room. I sweep them under right before the cameras go live every time.
Perfect.
Listen, I've had something on my mind, and I wanted to go over it with you since you are such a noted foodie, and I thought maybe we could bring this argument to the public. So I like to cook. One of the things I like to cook is homemade grits, and I made a bunch the other day, and I had some extra, so I brought it over to a friend's house. She and her husband were excited that I was bringing food, and then when I brought the grits, she ate them happily, and then ate a second portion. And the husband is from Rhode Island. He's not from Georgia, and he didn't touch them. He turned up his nose. So this divisive issue, Keith, where do you stand on grits as a food?
Oh, Ed, come on, man, Edward. Don't. I'm from Atlanta. I love grits. Like, I think grits are wonderful. I understand, as someone who's moved from the north or from the south to the north, I understand how some folks are unfamiliar with or don't even enjoy necessarily grits, especially if you look at them, they're kind of a porridgey kind of item. And for some people, that kind of mush in the morning is not for them. But I'll tell you who loves grits: my son Miles. And I'm super proud to have introduced something from his southern heritage that all of his northern friends will never get or understand. And he can introduce it to people and be like, oh, here's grits. Like when I was growing up, my dad used to make me cheese grits in the morning because I was making with cheese. I started making my grits with chicken stock rather than water, which has been a blessing for the flavor of my grits. But I always make them with cheddar cheese. I haven't quite figured out how to give them that like true like fluffy feeling. Like they start out really good, but then it doesn't take long for them to start to harden. So I imagine that probably I just need to cook them lower, slower, and with more fat. So probably like using half and half or something. But I haven't gotten there. I haven't figured out the perfect recipe for making grits. But I do love grits, and I'm glad to say that my son also loves grits. I'm sure you do. You have a grits trick that you like to share?
I mean, it's the trick that you mentioned, but haven't tried yet. So my daughter May also loves grits, and she loves that I make them with half and half, and also just a ton of fancy cheddar cheese that I melt in there. The kind of cheese that I only buy just for grits. And then I load it with cracked black pepper, fresh cracked black pepper. And I don't know about you, but I pour hot sauce all over mine too when I'm ready to eat.
I do like hot sauce. I don't usually eat it directly with grits, but I will if I make shrimp and grits, which is something I've also started messing with now that I started making grits at home. Some hot sauce, some tomato paste. That's a recipe I'm still working on. But we love some grits around here. But it is an ultimate podcast, so we can bring some grace to the grit as well and talk about some of the athletes on the field. We're going to start with our trivia question of the week. All right, so let's kick it off with our trivia question. The question for this week: which two players have been top 10 in yards for both of the Western Ultimate League's full seasons over the past 2 years? Which two players have been top 10 in total yardage, throwing in and receiving, in the Western Ultimate League? We're going to have the answer to that question in just a moment. But first, we're going to talk a little about Sunset Lake CBD. They have returned as a sponsor of the show, and Sunset Lake CBD was once a dairy farm for Ben and Jerry's, but now they're an organic and sustainable producer of high quality hemp and CBD products. They grow, harvest, process, and ship all of their own CBD products directly from their farm in Vermont to your door. Now, I recently had a chance to try out their melatonin gummies. So my toddler's in a phase where he gets up in the middle of the night and he comes in my room and kicks me out of my bed so he can sleep with my wife. And he lays there, and like that's the only way that he can relax. If I stay in the bed, he's kicking and pushing me out of the room. So now I have to go downstairs. I have to go to find a different bed or a couch to sleep on. And the other night I was sleeping in the basement, and it was cold and uncomfortable. I had to do it 2 nights in a row. Second night I took some melatonin gummies. Bam, I was out like a light. I had a nice, relaxing night's sleep despite a rather stressful set of circumstances. So, if you're a parent out there in need of some extra sleep, the melatonin gummies could help you out, or just anybody who needs to get some nice rest. That could be the product for you. You can check them out today at sunsetlakecbd.com and use the coupon code DEEPLOOK. That's all one word, DEEPLOOK, and that'll get you 20% off on your order. Farmer owned, Vermont grown, Sunset Lake CBD. All right, so our trivia question of the week, the answer for which two players were top 10 in yards in the first 2 seasons of the Western Ultimate League, the past 2 seasons? Well, one player has led in both years. Do you know who that is, Edward?
I have never looked at yardage stats for the WL, so I am shooting 100% blind here. Was it Sam Rodenberg, perhaps? I figured it'd be a Seattle player.
Interesting guess. I think yards often are stuck around throwing. So I think you want to think about throwers, but also the Seattle players. The Seattle players distribute their stats too much. Like everybody plays a ton. That said,
that's why nobody likes Seattle.
It is a thrower. It's Paige Kircher is one of them. The other, last year's MVP, Jade McLaughlin. So those are the two players who've been top 10 in both years. There's a couple players hovering around. Your Kayla Heltons, Julia Sherwood was outside the top 10, but those are the only two who've done it thus far. Maggie O'Connor, another one. We'll see who joins the list this year as two-time top 10 yardage players in the upcoming Western Ultimate League season. But that is your trivia question of the week. And the Western Ultimate League, we're waiting for their action, but we got a bunch of news about the Premier Ultimate League this past week. They had their PSP player sponsorship fundraiser, and that came with their roster announcement. So we got to see what the Premier Ultimate League's rosters are going to look like for the 2024 season. Edward, you and I took a look at these rosters and came up with the most interesting new players, or players that will be playing in new places this year in the Premier Ultimate League. So we each have a top 5 most interesting players. If you want to hear more, get the full scoop, you definitely got to check out Double Overtime. They are giving you all the full coverage on the Western Ultimate League and the PUL. So if you want more detailed coverage of what's going on with PUL rosters or WUL records, you got to check out Double Overtime with Jenna Weiner and Sasha Fogel. But we're going to run through our top 5 most interesting additions. Edward, do you want to go bottom to top or top to bottom? I'll let you start and kick us off.
Oh, we got to go top to bottom. And I know you and I have the exact same number 1 most interesting roster addition because New York Gridlock went shopping at the bulk Twins store and picked up both Valeria and Manuela Cardenas. I mean, that's got to be the biggest pickup in league history. I mean, am I wrong about that?
No, I mean, you got players who have plenty of rings. They're basically like 2 of the most dominant players in league history, and you get them as a package deal. Like that's pretty incredible, and definitely number 1 on my list. I mean, it's 2 of the best players in the world. Like what can you argue against?
No, nothing. And so there's 2 things that make this even more interesting than the fact that they're stars. Number 1 is that it reunites them with Gina Cartagena, who they have. The 3 of them there are a lot of great players on this Gridlock team, obviously, but the 3 of them can play keep away with the disc for 70 yards against anybody in the world and have done so. And we're just going to see more of that yet again. I mean, it's fitting that the Gridlock colors are pink because it's going to be like we have Revo on the field again. And the other interesting thing about this is that that isn't the only twin shopping that Gridlock did in the offseason. It's not quite as splashy, but they picked up former Seattle area player Linnea Sue. Famously, it was Whitman where Linnea and Alyssa Sue ran the suites in college back in the day, and they were so good there. And so they've only got 1 of those twins, but I mean, I feel like if you sign three twins in the offseason, you are, I mean, you're, it's basically a marketing play. They're going to start selling New York Twin Lock shirts.
I like that. I mean, we're as usual giving away free marketing ideas here on the podcast. But yeah, I think I think that's a great shout out, and I don't know if it's like a buy one get one get one kind of thing. I don't know how that works at the Twin store, but honestly, I think coming off of the club season that Linnea just had in the mixed division, I mean, I have her as my third most interesting ad. Like she's number three on my
Wow.
list. So like what a fantastic class. And you can't talk about New York and like we're not going to go into deep dives on all the rosters, but they had a ton of turnover. So this is going to be a really intriguing team coming in 2024. I think the biggest wild card squad as far as like I think you can expect a high quality, but it's like can they contend for a title with this group? Should they even be the favorites? Will they be the number one in our power rankings? I'll be curious to see how it works out because this is a very big set of roster turnover for them, and their offense is going to be concentrated elsewhere. So I like I mentioned, I also have the Cardenas Twins at the top of mine. We didn't want to take up two slots with each of them. My next ad is actually down in DC, coming in from Boston Brute Squad. Caroline Tornquist is my number two most interesting ad. Another player who had just a tremendous club season, really like a breakout year with Brute Squad in helping that team win the title. And one breakout player of the year with Brute. So he loses their other player of the year breakout player in Blaise Sevier. They keep Marge Walker. That's our breakout podium. All those people are DC associated. And now they got CT, who seems to be hitting her stride. And I think we'll have a lot of success in the PUL this year with DC.
It's interesting that you brought up DC Shadow roster as your next most interesting signing because I also think a DC Shadow player is the next most interesting signing. And I almost went with CT, Caroline Tornquist, but I actually think the more interesting signing is Marie Perivier, who hasn't played PUL in a couple of seasons. She's a former Atlanta Soul player. And she hasn't played high level club in even longer than that. But when she was playing for the Soul, she was their number one or two or three best player, certainly not any lower down than that. And is just like CT is one of those players who actually does everything on the field and does it right and is strong and is quick and can bomb it deep. I mean, the Marie Perivier backhand is legendary. And I can't wait to see it on camera again and hopefully in person at some point.
Well, this is how I know that you have the utmost respect for Vale and Manu because you put them above somebody that you played Gulti with. So I know that you truly respect the power of the Cardenases. Who else is on your list?
Next most interesting, I'm shifting out west, out Midwest. I guess we don't get too far beyond Midwest. Out to the Milwaukee Monarchs, who are an intriguing team always, but more so because they have one of my favorite players in the world signed again, Aaron Schrader. Aaron is an absolute dynamo on the field. A couple years ago, they had my catch of the year. They didn't win Ulti-World's catch of the year, but they should have down at TEP with like an out the back, trailing edge, layout grab, and just crisp throws. Played club most recently for Florida, and have like bounced around the Milwaukee scene and have played Atlanta in the past, and just absolute do it all kind of player. The player that you can build a roster around. Total plug and play. Love Aaron Schrader.
The kind of player who I think other players have a ton of respect for, but maybe like more casual fans don't know as well because they're not always on teams that are in really spotlighted positions. But a tremendous player, super exciting to watch. And you mentioned as a potential build around. That's actually where I want to go for my number 4. Is actually to Indy, where they're picking up Kat McGuire for this year's team. I think that is their biggest signing, but this is probably the most talented indie team that we've seen in any iteration of the Red. And McGuire is having an awesome college season with Michigan. Obviously, he's coming off a great club season with Hybrid, and I think can be the sort of centerpiece that Indy has lacked in some ways in the past. Really, just a connective piece on offense. He's quick, has great throws. It's just like a really versatile offensive piece who like can help everybody else shine and be kind of the focal point offensively. So very excited to see her playing in Indy. Who else you got on your list, Edward?
Well, okay, just to get back for a second, I love that they have this superstar and young superstar in Cat because it also it builds on so much that they already have. There's so much buy-in with that indie program. You know, they're a pre-UL team. They were indie Reds slash Rogue back into season right before the PUL officially launched, and they have carried that legacy like through present day. You know, Indy isn't great place, but it's not the biggest ultimate hub in the world. But they've been at the center of this PUL movement, and like they deserve that kind of star. Anyway, Cat McGuire gives it to him. I'm so happy for this program. Next on my list, really interesting in Minnesota. They are picking up Torrey Gray. You know, they've lost Robin Finnig. We're not like going to dwell on roster losses right now, but they need that kind of like dynamic bomb thrower. And we know Torrey Gray is like an aces defender from her mixtape club days and from her college play with Carlton Syzygy. But if Jenna Weiner's reporting from this past weekend at the West Coast Team USA tryouts was any indication, apparently Torrey is not afraid to just set the torch to the cannon's fuse and unleash some booming, booming, booming hucks and do a really good job of it. You know, they are, you know, they've got Sarah Mextroth out there. They've got Michaela Daly. They've got Danielle Byers. They have all of these players who are really good at chasing down these throws. And a lot of times last year it was Robin throwing to them and putting them in the end zone. They needed a big time replacement for it. And I think they've got it in a young star in Torrey Gray.
You can't watch Troy Gray and not feel like you're going to get some massive forehands and a ton of blocks. Like the defensive reputation stands on its own. But I'll be curious to see if she's going to end up winning a D-Pody this year because I think she's going to be on the short list in D1 women's. But certainly it could be one of the best defenders in the PUL as well. My last player is also going to go. I'm going to go back to DC with this one. A player who I feel like I just can't quit. I'm so intrigued by the skill set, and that is Jamie Erickson coming over from the WL playing with Seattle. But like, I just like a player with that much size and length who also has the level of throwing skill that Jamie Erickson has. I can't help but be intrigued by that combination of tools. You know, it's like when you see WNBA player who's like both really tall but also incredibly skilled, like can handle the ball and shoot. And so you're like, how exactly do we match up with this person? That is Jamie Erickson. I don't think that she's been able to like consistently put all the pieces together, but you see it sometimes, which is on the field, that she can take over. So I will be very interested in seeing how she integrates in the PUL again and what that skill set could do, because I feel like that there's a special type of player in there. It's just about getting it out all the time. So I personally am very intrigued.
Yeah, I think we saw little glimpses of that when she started to build the chemistry with so many of those DC area players in her club season last year with Scandal. And I feel like that was the getting her feet wet version of Jamie Erickson. Now we're going to get the Ben ready to take over. I mean, you don't know until we see them take the field, but that's the sense that I got watching her play club last year, that, oh, this is about to be a massive turn up. And, you know, we would be remiss not to mention one key addition to Raleigh Radiance, and that's Lindsay Sue, who also happens to be producing us live right now. But they're an incredible player. Can't wait to see them take the field back again.
We are not above Lindsay Sue hype here on the show. I'm here for it. A great pick, a tremendous pick, unmatched from our own Edward. So that's going to run down our PUL top five. So we got lots of college to get to. Two big tournaments this past weekend and two massive tournaments, two of the biggest of the year coming up next weekend. We're going to break down what's going on in College Ultimate coming up in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back to Deep Look, and we are getting into that college talk. I know the people love it. You know I love it. And an interesting weekend this past weekend, maybe a little bit more, nationals fringe, regional level focused in some ways, but we got to see some teams with high expectations, and that kind of sets us up for this coming weekend where we'll have a number of elite teams competing at Stanford Invite, particularly in the women's division and at Smoky Mountain out east. But this past weekend, we had Eastern's qualifier and we had Commonwealth Cup weekend 2, as it were. Edward, what's your biggest story? And that'll take us to which tournament we should talk about first.
Okay. That is such a hard question. I think the biggest overall story is UNC Wilmington beating Penn State to make it to the final and then winning all the way through in Eastern's qualifier. They were the most unexpected, I think, result of the entire weekend, looking at both tournaments. And I really thought Penn State had it in the bag, particularly against a Wilmington side who have been kind of spotty and in and out all weekend. But you get to the semis, you get to the finals, and we have it on tape, and all of a sudden, Christian Bellis, a second-year player for Wilmington, I mean, the whole team was good during both games, but Christian Bellis was on Saturn and everybody else was on Earth, basically. It was shocking to watch how much he took over in every way during those two games.
And we didn't get that low point that we've seen from Wilmington. Like, we've seen the talent at some of their earlier tournaments, but this is a team that has losses to UNC Charlotte, to McGill, to South Carolina. They've lost to Penn State twice prior to this.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't get that lull at qualifier. Like, they beat Penn State in the semis. They dominated South Carolina in the final. Yeah, the final score was 12-8, but like, they were in full control of that game from beginning to end. And it looked like they might run away with it when the way the game started. And most of their other wins were pretty comfortable. This was a stellar performance for Wilmington. And I don't know if it's going to help them in the bid picture necessarily, like the AC as a whole. But like, obviously the result is, but is it going to help the AC as a whole, like beating South Carolina again, beating UNC Charlotte? I don't know what's going to happen with the AC's bid picture, but it's got to brighten your prospects for them to be the team. Maybe even they could potentially usurp NC State. I mean, this was a very impressive showing. They didn't even have their full roster. They're missing one of their best players, Diego Colazzo. I think that this Wilmington team, I'm never going to buy that they're super consistent. Maybe if they show us one more tournament of just playing well the whole way through, that'll change my tune. But as it is, the ceiling, though, is really scary. They're not a team you want to draw in the bracket at AC. Maybe not even if you're UNC. Like, even UNC might be like, can we not? Can we go elsewhere? But maybe that's too much.
I doubt Darkside is too worried. But yeah, I mean, I think Alpha have to be looking over their shoulders at this Seaman team. I mean, one of the things I think might be different from earlier in the year, and again, I haven't been to one of the Wilmington tournaments live yet, so I haven't had that 100% eyes on view, but I feel like Christian Bellis might have missed time earlier in the year. And Jay Thomas, who's one of their more important defensive players might have missed time earlier in the year. And if anybody in the chat knows and says I'm wrong, please correct me. But I don't think that D line was nearly as high powered early in the year as it is now. And Patrick Grosjean's playing really well for the offense. Colby Frankfurt is playing really well for the offense. Stuart Kelly is playing really well for the offense. They don't have as much experience with their top end because some of their best players are young. Ryan Manuel, oh my gosh, if you want to see a guy fly around the field, watch Ryan Manuel, number 8. Their font numbers, the fonts of their jersey numbers are horrible. Big criticism for the team. But if you're watching a team, watch Ryan Manuel. He wears number 8, looks like number 3 or number 13 sometimes, and sweatpants, and he'll put on a show. This is a really good team.
How worried are you about Spank after this weekend? I mean, they almost lost to Ohio State in the round prior to the semifinals, and then they do lose to UNC Wilmington in a game that I want to say they trailed pretty much the whole way. How worried are you about this Penn State team that everybody was so excited about a couple of weeks ago?
Well, I almost got worried. That's a really good question. But before the tournament, I was messaging a bit back and forth with their coach, Luke, and he was really worried about the weekend heading in because they were showing up -4 starters, and also just -4 bodies on a tournament where you have to play 4 games in a row both days to get through the weekend. They crushed Saturday. I mean, their closest game was 13-8, 13-7. They just blew the doors off of Saturday pool play. They finished pool play with another huge win before they got into the really difficult games against Ohio State and Wilmington. And I think they showed that they are good enough to be good when down. And that's going to be key as they get into the postseason because you never know what's going to happen. But we've seen Ethan Pigeon dominate for them in the cutting lanes before. Wilmington threw a zone on them that basically they didn't take him out of the game touches wise, but it took those big plays out of the game. They tried it once and he and Wilmington's Jay Thomas kind of did a double layout in the back of the end zone, and Thomas got the block, and it looked like Penn State were like, okay, that can't be option A right now. And so they trusted basically Xander Lutz and Doug Hoyer to carve up the zone, and they did it. And I would have still been worried about them with the loss because I would have thought, oh no, maybe they're not going to be in bid range, or oh no, now they're not going to go to Easterns. But as it turns out, Cody Mills, beloved Mills, ranked number is second bid for the Ohio. And I feel like there are a few I'm not looking at it right now, but I think there are a few teams ahead of the bubble. So they're still there. And there were enough bids to Easterns that they got a bid anyway. So they're still going to Easterns and get to play again against top teams and presumably with their full roster. So I've seen enough from Penn State that I'm not worried about them. I still don't have a clear idea of where their ceiling is. Can they beat Pitt in the Ohio Valley? Can they make the bracket at Easterns? I don't know the answers to those, but I'm not worried about their floor at all.
Yeah, they will get to go to Easterns as well as South Carolina and I believe Wilmington. So all 3 of those teams end up getting spots to Easterns, which are kind of the coveted prize of this tournament for so many of the teams. But some had already earned their spot, and I think Penn State's in a pretty good position as far as bids are concerned. So I'd feel pretty good if I'm in the Ohio Valley as far as getting that second bid and competing with Pitt. Now, looking at Commonwealth Cup, switching over to the women's division, it's Tufts who gets the win, and they were kind of in some ways analogous to where Penn State was in Easterns. I think they came in as the heavy favorite, probably even more so as the lone top 10 team in the field. And like Penn State, they get their big test in semifinals. They have to come back against UPenn, who came from the lower pools, didn't even come out of the power pools. UPenn fights their way to semifinals, and Tufts breaks on Universe to win in semifinals and then goes on to cruise past Michigan in the final. They went up 6-0 and never looked back in the final. So aside from that one hiccup, Tufts pretty strong throughout the weekend. So they get the kind of storybook ending that Penn State didn't end up with and get the big win over UPenn in semis and win the tournament. I think when I looked it up, it was their first time winning a tournament since 2017 in the regular season. Otherwise, I think they had won
Wow.
regionals once and conferences a bunch of times. But when you play an elite tournament slate, they make semifinals a lot, but they don't win them a lot, and so they end up getting the win here. What's your takeaways when you look at the results from Commonwealth Cup?
I mean, honestly, they're all over the place. Yeah, what to make of this Tufts team? They played close with a Georgia team that has been a bit spotty. They played close with Penn, who is definitely a good team. We've seen that at both Queen City and now at Commonwealth. Like Danny Lott is a tremendous handler. Grace Maroon has played wonderfully for them. They are a really solid group, but they're not a top 10 ceiling team. They're a really good, maybe they'll have a shot in an Ohio Valley without a clear favorite. They could win it and go to nationals, but we're not talking about them as a quarters semis team at nationals the way we're talking about Tufts. So I liked that Tufts was able to win the tournament, but at the end of the day, you sort of expect all of those margins to be big. I mean, they were the clear front runners. It wasn't even close. And yeah, Leah Schwartz and Emily Kemp is still an impossible duo to guard. Yeah, Edie Lamb can put the clamps on anybody in college and frankly, most people in club. But shouldn't that translate to, 13-4, 13-8, the way it did against Michigan in the final? It's like they found themselves. But where was that Tufts team the rest of the tournament? That's my biggest question coming out of it.
It was a bit of a windy weekend, particularly like in the back end of the first day, and I think that served to deaden some of the scores. I think you see a lot of close scores in many of these games. I think that was partially because of the conditions. Like you don't see a lot of games making it all the way to the score cap. But I agree with you. I mean, frankly, they had the best thrower, Lee Schwartz. They had the best receiver, Emily Kemp, and they're the best defender, Eddie Lamb. So like they have three of the players who are like, I don't know, maybe top five in those things in the entire country. Uh, those are three players who could all have a shot at making All Americans or award podiums this year. And like, there really isn't another team with that type of top end at this tournament. So I think you would expect them to be a little more comfortable in some of these results. But I also could see how maybe, I don't want to say complacent, but they took the opportunity to do some more developing rather than just like be like, okay, we could just have Leah come under and jacket them like camp over and over again. Like we could do that, and they did do some of that in the final, but they didn't have to necessarily rely on it. And maybe that was part of the training because they know they'll have some stiffer competition if they want to achieve their goals, like winning their region and making it deep into the bracket at nationals. But personally, the rest of the tournament, like you said, is kind of a topsy turvy like mess, and it just tells me that a lot of these regions are going to be messes. The Ohio Valley, the AC after UNC, the Great Lakes, the Metro East, like everybody here, it feels like it's going to be wide open. Like who should be the favorite in the Great Lakes? Is it Michigan? Is it Notre Dame? Like Chicago came there with like a skeleton crew, and they still had some competitive
Right.
results. Like, what do we do with the AC after UNC? I got no idea. Virginia seems like a shell of themselves. Are they going to pull it together? Like, how good could South Carolina be? What's NC State up to? OV, I got nothing. I mean, who's the best team in the OV? UPenn, Pitt, Ohio State. I don't know. So I think
You got
we
nothing.
ended up with kind of a mishmash of results altogether.
Well, let me ask you a couple like focused questions. First off, what was more impressive? The way Michigan beat Georgia or the way Penn played close with Tufts?
To
Michigan, who
me,
lost to Georgia at
Penn's
Queen City.
performance.
Okay.
I mean, I
See, I
I
don't
think
know.
Penn delivering on the weekend as a whole. They beat Ohio State. They beat NC State. Like these are quality teams. They get out of the lower bracket where I think the competition level was a little bit lower, but I think they were clearly a step above those teams. And beating Georgia is a good thing because Georgia's obviously really talented. They probably have they could have the second highest ceiling of any team at this tournament. Like when they're playing their best, they're probably the only team here that I think I would take after Tufts. But they also have shown, not unlike the Wilmington team that we were talking about EQs, that they just, it's hard for them to put together, strings of 5, 6 games consistently. So I think that that's a problem for them that they're going to keep running into. And so I'm a little less enthused by Michigan's performance there, although they did dominate, which is a great sign. I think Michigan is probably your favorite in the Great Lakes. It's just not by much. I don't know. I didn't look at FrisbeeRankings.com. Is there an outside chance the Great Lakes could sneak away with 2 bids? Could they tuck in 2 teams at 17 and 19 and get away with 2 bids or something like that? I don't know.
I think they're sitting on 2 right now. I think both Notre Dame and Michigan are in the bid earning range, which is wild. I'm going to double check that.
An absolute coup.
Yeah, I mean, it's
absolute coup
completely ridiculous. And then I have some insider knowledge to drop on you as well. Right now, the Great Lakes have Michigan at 9 and Notre Dame at 16. And there are, 3 teams between Notre Dame and the edge of the bubble right now. That's huge for them. And that could legitimately stand up. I don't know if it will. There's a lot of Frisbee left to play. Stanford invite is going to, raise the strength of schedule for so many teams out west because, Vermont's going. We'll talk about that later. But that's possible.
Very, very interesting.
And then, the insider knowledge. Oh yeah, you talked about the way Georgia has trouble putting together a complete tournament, and 2 of Georgia's main cutters, Sammy Chambers and Fiona Cashin, were both out at Golte yesterday. Of course, after a long tournament weekend, played Golte the next day, and immediately said that they both ran more than 17 miles each of the days on Sunday and Saturday. And I don't know how that is sustainable over a 2-day weekend. That's out of maybe you can keep running, but I know when I'm that tired, the mental mistakes start to really add up, and maybe you forget to set the mark the right way, or you don't follow through on your forehand and you turf one, and those little things become a big problem over time. So you want to see them be able to not have to lean so hard on individual players to keep those motors running at that high a level.
Yeah, I think I said in the Discord that they hadn't beaten the thin roster allegations quite yet, and I haven't seen any evidence to the contrary. And that feels like it's going to define them. I mean, at Quincy Booth and Fiona Cashin are going to get buckets. That's just the deal with them. But are they going to be able to get enough rest to be fresh when it comes down to it? They're the kind of team that I think you could be worried about them at regionals, even with them outpacing the competition, just because they can gas themselves out if they end up in 1 or 2 bad matchups, despite being the what I think will be the heavy favorite in the Southeast when push comes to sub. But that's the weekend that was, and somehow there's an even bigger weekend on the horizon. It's you get through one wave and then there's an even bigger wave cresting on the other side. You're oh my gosh, I gotta hold my breath big for this one. Stanford invite out west, men's and women's division, although the women's division with a really strong field, and then Smoky Mountain invite out east with a really strong men's division field. Let's start in the Eastern time zone with Smoky Mountain. Edward, I'm not entirely sure what is the big thing to look at in this tournament, because there's so much. I mean, these are 2 really stacked. This is a really stacked field, but so I think ultimately it's going to be about which of these teams proves themselves to be truly elite. As your number 1 seed, you got UNC. Then number 2, you got Georgia. Number 3, you got Brown, and number 4, you have UMass. Although I will say seeding looks a little wonky. My understanding is that the focus was on giving diversity in matchup, letting teams see new teams, see out of region teams, than it was on having seeding that was structured really top to bottom as the best teams. So take that for what you will. But Edward, what draws your eye when you look at this Smoky Mountain field?
I mean, first off, the easy thing to say is that I think this is probably going to be the best men's division field we see all year. Northwest Challenge men's is going to be good. I've kind of seen a preview of that team list, and Easterns is always good. But this is East Coast, West Coast. We're getting, I haven't counted, but every team, 14 of these 16 teams are in our top 25. Utah State was, and their power rankings preview, they're about to get bumped on a week when they were inactive, so they could play their way right back in. This is truly the mini nationals right here. This is where we're going to see what we're going to see on Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah, weather permitting, and barring some other strange thing, I think whoever wins this tournament is going to be considered the number one team and the favorite to make nationals. I mean, maybe something happens where SLO still ends up number one. Maybe UNC like splits with somebody. They lose to Carleton in pool play and then beat him in the final or something like that. There's some weird ways you can get there, but I think that you're going to be talking about whoever wins this tournament as a favorite to win the title. And then as is being pointed out in our chat right now, this is going to add a lot of connectivity. This is a big bid tournament. You have a bunch of teams around the bubble. You have regions that are fighting for bids. A lot of the regions represented here are regions that hope to have multiple bids and are going to need to have success around the margins. You look at New England. Are they going to be able to get 3, 4 bids? Even the Northwest, Utah State is coming out. Are they going to be able to earn points for their region? You got NC State in the AC. You've got the North Central, who would love to have more than 2 bids, but needs to secure their 2 with Carleton and Minnesota. I think they're probably in a pretty good spot. It is worth noting Wisconsin is playing at Stanford Invite, but can they do their part? You got the Southwest represented. UCLA and Cal are in the field. This is a big tournament for bids as well, and those are kind of like opposite end implications. I think that a lot of the bid conversation is going to end up being what happens in consolation. And the title favorite is going to be all about what happens at the front end of the bracket. But when I look at this tournament, those are the things that jump out to me. I think, are there any teams in particular that you're curious about what they're going to do this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, we have actually buried the lead here, which was my fault because I led with talking about, what a great field, the teams, but UNC Darkside, number 1 overall, undefeated on the season, 3-time defending national champs. They have played, Carolina Kickoff and Queen City Tune-Up, which are, no offense to those fields, they had some good teams, but they didn't have anybody at anywhere near a UNC level. So those were essentially kind of warm-up tournaments for them. This is the first weekend where we find out, can anybody beat them? I mean, everybody's going to take a swing at the champs. This is where UMass Zoodisk beat them last year. And could we see somebody jump to the front of the pack again here? I mean, can Georgia beat UNC? We've seen them be competitive with them at times in the past. Can Brown beat UNC if they meet up? We didn't see the best version of Vermont at Florida warm-up, but they're going to get a chance early. Colorado is a team I have my eye on. All of these teams, and UMass again, of course, are teams that could be the challengers to UNC. So it's like, which one is actually going to emerge as either a winner against UNC or like a legitimate threat? Will there even be one this year? That's the question that is the main one for this weekend.
Can Georgia beat UNC? Can Georgia win a game at this damn tournament? Like they struggle to put up points when they go to Smoky Mountain Invite. It's ridiculous. I've never seen a team so snake bitten by a single tournament. It's absolutely wild. But obviously on the merits, you got to consider them a top challenger. But the history is not on their side. I mean, to me, the team I want to see the most, I think, is probably Colorado. Both for the points of connectivity, getting a sense of how the West stacks up against the East. We're going to get a great measuring stick from them, but also a chance to see them in their second tournament. We saw them in their first. They reached the final. They looked really good, but then a little bit out of place once they went up against SLO. Can they iron out some of those things as you naturally would expect in the progression of their season? And can they rise to the level of a contender? The disappointing narratives from last year have kind of stuck to this team, but they've had some decent amount of turnover. Obviously, Tobias Brooks is a big addition. And they're in a very intriguing pool. I mean, they're in the pool, I think, that I'm the most interested in as well. So I would not be surprised if nobody emerges from that pool unscathed, with Pitt, UMass, and UCLA all in the pool. It's a dangerous pool D, but I think Colorado is the team that I'm the most focused on. Do we want to just do we want to just knock out our picks for Smoky Mountain while we're here, and then we'll go over to California?
Let's knock him out.
Okay. So last time Edward was on the show, he didn't score Charlie a lot of points picking in his honor. So this time Charlie was adamant that he wanted to do some of his own picks. So he said in his own picks, but we said I got him to agree that Edward could change one pick. So Edward has the ability here to influence Charlie's points, just not completely take them over. But I, however, have to make my picks. Looking at Smoky Mountain, man, I am really tempted to pick the UNC loss in here. I'm not going to lie to you, but I just like, they're the safest bet. And I don't know exactly who else to think is going to be that team. Like, there are just so many contenders. Like, I really want to pick one of UMass or Colorado, but whoever wins that pool is on the same side of the bracket as UNC. And they have Pitt and UCLA in the pool. So it's like, even though those are the teams I believe in, they're in a horrible setup for me to actually thread the needle and get UNC versus one of those teams. Some of the chat, Crispy Taco says that Carleton UVM UNC pool is crazy. I don't know if I would go to crazy. I'm like coveting my Carleton stock right now, but I need to see a little bit more out of that pool before I get given the level of competition across this tournament before I notch them as a crazy pool. It is a good pool though, compelling. That's pretty much the state of affairs across the board here. I think I am going to do it. I'm going to try and thread this needle here. I'm going to go UMass over UNC in the final. Let's get crazy. I'm going to go UMass over UNC in the final here. It's the least crazy I think I can manage.
Well, you're just copy pasting from last year, so that's fine. But I do like that you're picking against the favorites. I think it's more important to win fans than win points, as I showed with my own picks that didn't pan out or win Charlie any points. But yeah, I mean that makes sense. You have to wonder, if it's whoever ends up on the other side of the bracket as UNC is really what you're betting on here, because you like UNC to make the final. I like UNC to make the final, and so it's like, who's going to end up second in that pool? And it sounds like you have Colorado beating UMass out for pool honors, and then UMass cruising through the other side of the bracket until they meet UNC.
Yeah, if I could pick D2, I would do that. Like, if I could pick UNC versus D2 in the final, I think I would do that. But I'll settle for having to pick a specific team. Now, Charlie sent in his picks. He's got UNC over Brown. Edward, you had the full slate of picks in front of you. Is this going to be the one that you choose to alter?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as a matter of fact, it is. I unfortunately agree with what I'm seeing for Charlie on both sides of the Stanford invite. So yeah, let me take a look. And am I gonna change the result he's got or pick somebody different in the final for one of these? Let me see. Yeah, we're gonna change a team for sure. And I'm gonna pick against UNC in semis, and I'm going to take Colorado over Brown in the final. I'm picking D1, you pick D2. So I've got Fulton and Charlie. You've got the knuckle puck if we're putting this into Mighty Ducks parlance.
I've been outfoxed. You found the way to get D1, to get the team that's playing the best and is upsetting UNC. Uh, it's genius level work. Charlie will be absolutely livid that you've decided not to pick UNC when I had opened the door for him to get UNC for free. So I look forward to his. I hope he's in the chat, just absolutely dying right now, because this is great. Excellent work, Edward. I think for this, I'm changing up how we're going to do subscriber picks. I feel like the subscribers basically always end up with like the number one and number two because it's just like the wisdom of the crowd. Like if we do it that way, we're always going to end up with like the top two favorites. It wasn't quite the case last week because the field was so muddled after the favorites, but I want to add a little more spice. So I think for a little while, we're going to test out picking individual subscribers. We've done this in the past. We're going to go back to that. Make sure you're in the Discord. I'm going to put up a post and ask people to react if they want to be the person picked, and then I'll pick at random at the end of the day, and then we'll get the picks in. So the subscriber picks will be coming from a single individual who we'll talk about next week once we get those picks nailed down. All right, so let's hop out to Stanford Invite, where we can not let's just talk about the women's field first. We can, if there's some leftover space, we'll talk about the men's division. So women's division field out at Stanford Invite, very very strong. This is going to be one of the biggest tournaments, maybe the biggest tournament of the year in the women's division. You got UBC number 1, Vermont number 2 seed, Stanford as your 3 seed, and Colorado as your 4 seed. But ranked teams basically in the top 3 slots in every pool. And solid challengers down the way too. So, Edward, where's the place to start out of Stanford?
I want to highlight 2 teams that are both a couple of the top seeds who I think underperformed to a decent amount at their first outings. And those are Vermont, who I think weren't quite as sharp at Queen City as we would have liked, and Colorado, who definitely weren't as sharp at Pres Day as we would have liked. We know both of these are good teams. We know they're talented. They've had the first tournament. I feel like both were wearing, cotton tees. They were doing the warm-up tournament thing, and that's fine. That's good. But Stanford Invite is where all of a sudden you need to put your business clothes on and go out there and show what you can really do. This is the time to perform. So are we going to see a bounce back from Quandary and Ruckus?
You read my mind. I mean, that to me is the number one storyline, especially as it concerns Colorado, given that I think they were the furthest off the path at their first tournament, more so than Vermont. But yeah, that is 100% the thing you're watching for is this tournament is what do these teams really look like now they've had a chance to get their sea legs underneath them. I think after that, you're still looking at these top seeds. Like, can UBC maintain this level of sharpness, or did we maybe overestimate them based on their first showing? They're going to fill out the roster probably a little bit at this tournament, which is their typical debut tournament, but with an extra tournament on their belt, I mean, they could be looking like a title contender out of the gates if they come out in there strong at this tournament, or they could fall back to earth a little bit. That could still mean making the finals, or maybe even winning the tournament in some close games. I don't know, but I think that's part of it. And then, are we going to see a complete Stanford team? As we're looking at these top seeds, they've been having some good results, but obviously didn't get what they wanted at Pres Day with the getting broken on Universe to lose to Oregon. No Oregon in the field to take it away from Stanford this time. So can they take down their home tournament and can they get a more complete performance? When you get past those top teams, which of these teams below them do you think has the best chance of outperforming expectations, Edward?
Oh, the best chance. That is a really interesting question because I could see it. Well, it won't be. Let's just get this out of the way now. It won't be BYU, even though I think they're really talented because they're not going to play on Sunday, obviously. So really, I feel like it's down to either Washington Element or UC Santa Barbara Burning Skirts, as those are teams I feel like we've definitely seen the top 10 level of play. And the Burning Skirts, I mean, they were one of the teams who beat Colorado at Pres Day, weren't they? Check me if I'm wrong about that, but I think they were. And yeah, I think
handily, if I remember.
I think the question is right. Yeah. And I just want to know is that all we're going to get out of them? Both of them were quarterfinalists last year at nationals. Maybe UCSB missed it by a game. I think they made it through. But yeah, I mean, how high does the ladder go? What's the top rung they reach before they start getting wobbly and decide, no, I'm good. I'm gonna stay right here. I want to see them take it to Stanford. I want to see somebody run with UBC's cutters. I want to see them emphatically beat Colorado again, or for the first time in terms of Washington. Like those are the big question marks. Yeah, they could get there, and this is where you prove it.
Yeah, UCSB with a great chance to make a statement against Vermont, and I agree with you on Washington. They would be one of the teams that I would pick. I think that there is a chance that this team's ceiling is like being a semifinal contender, being a top 5, top 6 team. They would have to really deliver on that this weekend, but with Lucy Tanner and Anna Cauchi and Sophia Palmer, like they've got the elite pedigree. They've got a bit of depth around those players, so I could see Washington jumping up. But the other team that kind of intrigues me is UVic. I know that
Right.
may come off a little bit like surprising, but they went out to Santa Barbara Invite, and they didn't really get any big wins. They beat UCSC, which is better than it might appear, and UCLA has looked solid since then. But they played really close with Stanford, and they were doing all that without Abba Brudney, who might be their best player.
Mhm.
So if they have Abba Brudney back to join Alicia Brawley and Erica Edgel, like I think that could add a lot to a team that generally plays with a small roster, and I think really benefits from each individual player they get, especially star level players. So I think that there's a chance this UVic team could outperform if all that shows up. I got to say, Pittsburgh traveling cross country the weekend after a big tournament. Yikes, that is a tough spot. That is asking a lot of your
Uh,
team to go out there and be successful. And if I'm UPenn and Ohio State, I am glaring at Pittsburgh Danger right now. Like, what are you doing to our chances of potentially getting 2 bids? I mean, this could be. Look, I'll say it. It could be the danger zone for Pittsburgh. I mean, this. I am worried, but I hope that they come out and prove me wrong and deal with extremely difficult conditions well. It's going to be a real test of resilience for them. But wow, that's a tough schedule.
yeah, is it going to be the danger zone or is it just going to be the pits? We don't know.
Oh, very good. Very good. All right.
Raised you
So
one.
let's get to our Stanford picks. Charlie sends in UBC over Stanford. Edward has used up his changes. Would you change them if you could?
No, I don't. And actually, instead of talking about what I would change, since I pretty much agree with him, I wonder, like, just out of curiosity, if you had to pick one right now, which was scarier? If you're like coaching another top level team in the women's division, what is scarier, the way UBC looked at Santa Barbara Invite or the way Stanford looked at Pres Day?
Um, I would say UBC. Uh, I think seeing UBC be that good that early when they usually don't even play at this point in the
Hmm.
year is like, wow, this team could be like the clear number 2 in the country. Stanford, I don't think it's that weird for them to be good. I mean, they picked up a great addition this year. They returned basically like 3 of their top 4 players, if not their top 3 players. Like, I think there's plenty of reason to expect Stanford to be good at this point in the year, especially getting Sage McGinley-Smith back at PDI. And yeah, disappointing loss to Oregon, but this is a team you trust to progress. So sure, for me, surely seeing UBC be this good. My picks, I am not going to deviate. I think UBC comes out and looks extremely good again. I'm going to take them over Vermont, who I think bounces back. We start to see Vermont shape into the team that they're going to be going down the stretch. And I think you see UBC cruise, maybe even up until like the first half against Vermont, and then maybe it takes control of that game. But I'm calling UBC over Vermont, number 1 over number 2 seeds here. But I think that there's compelling cases for other squads, so I don't feel that bad about making this pick. Let's take a look at the men's division at Stanford Invite 2. Not quite the same cachet in the field as we have in the women's division, but you do have Oregon at the top and Oregon State number 2. How about that come up? You got WashU as your 3 seed and Santa Cruz as your 4 seed. You got some traveling teams like Wisconsin, Vanderbilt, Tulane, Illinois, Western Washington. So you got some regional representation from teams that we haven't seen much of. Edward, does anybody have a chance of taking down Oregon or Oregon State in this one?
Yeah, not Oregon, I don't think, but I'm looking right at that WashU matchup with Oregon State. I think that is the single most interesting game. I mean, let's assume some of these seeds hold at least at the top. They're probably playing in semis. Is that the way the bracket's going to shake out? Yeah. I mean, these are the teams that would meet in semis if they get there, and they are both really good. They are both, about 10 great players deep. And I think there are going to be a lot of interesting matchups. I hope that WashU rather, like travels with their full set of players. But yeah, I think they could upset Oregon State. I think Oregon State could take it to them. I think that's the most interesting matchup. And I don't think either of them is going to beat Oregon. What do you think?
I'm mostly aligned with that. I think that the top 4 seeds are going to end up being the 4 best teams. I do think the UC schools, UCSB and UCSD, do present credible challenges, and I feel like always Western Washington has the chance to outperform expectation. But I can't say that I'm super enthused by the likes of Wisconsin or Illinois or a Tulane team that's pretty far removed from their top end iterations. Look, Wisconsin, the Hodag name is great. And when I look at their roster, I see talented players, but I felt like that for like 2 or 3 years, and the results just never back it up. So I've given up on having faith until they prove me otherwise. You would think a team with Nico Rodabat and Per Norbert and, you look at Joe Liebforth. You think that Graham Alexander, you'd think would go and get wins. I don't know. Like, I got nothing. They got to show me something before I'm ready to get back on the Hodak bandwagon. Charlie's picks, because we're going to do picks for Stanford Invite. He's got Oregon over OSU. I think I'm going to do the same thing. Sadly, I will say I like harbor still some of the Oregon State reticence that after last year's inconsistent performance. I'm still a little
Mm-hmm.
stuck on that. But I'm going to choose to look at this team and think that they are maybe past that. They only lost to really good teams at Pres Day. They beat the type of team that we might have seen them upset by in other years. So I think I'm going to choose faith in Oregon State, and even though WashU's pretty good, I think Oregon State can play well and still lose to WashU. I'm going to take Oregon over Oregon State as last call. Any changes you would make
Disagree.
if you were picking?
I don't have one. I already spent it on Smoky Mountain, but yeah, I would take just to make a difference, and I think it's kind of a coin flip heading into the weekend. But I would pick WashU over Oregon State to make the final.
Don't sleep on the Tucks in the chat. Look, if Tulane travels well, I think that they could kind of win some games. I don't know if I'm necessarily going to be able to expect them to compete like for a semifinal spot. But maybe Edward, you said earlier you should pick for the fans and not the points. I feel like if I wanted to pick for the fans,
Right.
I would have picked at Smoky Mountain Invite. I would have picked UAH over Slow. I feel like that would have won me the fans at Smoky Mountain Invite, but not necessarily the points on that front. So we've got all our picks out of the way. We didn't talk at all about last week's picks. Just a quick review. I had in Commonwealth, I had Tufts over Pitt. Everybody had Tufts, including the subscribers. And so everybody had Tufts. Charlie and the subscribers both had Tufts over Georgia. That was pretty far from true. I had Tufts over Pitt, equally distant. So we all get the same points from Commonwealth. And at EQ, everybody had Penn State winning. Charlie and the subscriber. Charlie had Penn State over UNC Charlotte. The subscribers have Penn State over UNC Wilmington, so the subscribers take home a single point for Wilmington. And I had Penn State over South Carolina, so I'll take a point for South Carolina. So that makes the count, I believe, Keith 25, subscribers 21, and Charlie with 15. So Charlie has a chance to make a comeback this week. If UNC loses, he's going to feel vindicated, but Otherwise, he might be mad at you, Edward, for that one. So that gets our college picks out of the way. And the last bit of show we got for you, our question of the week. And this is an interesting one. This got a lot of conversation in our Discord. It comes in from Hoffman. 40, it referenced the Miracle on Ice, which at the time, February 22nd, I think it was the 44th anniversary of the Miracle on Ice, which I also saw a Twitter poll about the best sports commentator call of all time. For me, it is the Miracle on Ice. Do you believe in miracles? Is the greatest sports call we've ever heard. There probably won't ever be another one. That was the biggest upset in maybe sports history. I don't know if I would say that, but it definitely is up there. What are some of the biggest ultimate upsets in Frisbee's history? Edward, anything jump out to you as the all-time great ultimate upsets?
Yeah, there are a few. I mean, somebody in our chat, but the year that Atlanta Ozone in club beat Seattle Riot, was that 2019 or 2018 in quarters to make semis? That was remarkable. That those Riot years were not the leaner Riot years of today. Those were the unstoppable Riot years. Those were the Riot was winning Worlds, Fury was winning USAU Nationals, and everybody else was behind them in the conversation years. And that came out of nowhere like anything I can remember in the club division. So that one stands out to me.
I think that was 2018 because there was a Worlds year. So it was like a really big deal that Ozone got that upset too because it also set them up to go to Worlds. So I think that's if I remember correctly. Similarly, you also had Schwa getting an upset. I think that the next year in quarters to make it to semis too. So that's a big one. For me, the time that Florida, the number one ranked team in Division I men's, lost at sectionals and failed to reach regionals. Unreal. I can't believe that happened. That to me is an all-time upset. It was brought up when the U24 Japanese women's team defeated the U.S. Charlie and I harken back to that game all the time because they didn't play Jessie Schaffner and they played her 2 points and she came in and threw 2 assists or 2 dots or whatever. And it was why is Jessie Schaffner not playing more? That's one that we'll always remember. Charlie brought up Iowa over Minnesota at North Central Men's Regionals. That ended up, I believe, sending Minnesota Duluth to nationals in that year. For me, there's only one upset, though. After all that, there's only one upset. And I said this in Discord. There's only one upset, and that's Arizona State men's B beating Arizona State men's A at Centex one year in consolation play. I mean, there is nothing sweeter than the B team over the A team. And Teresa said, I'm going to come in hot. The people that know me, this is a truly momentous upset. I never want it to be forgotten that the B team at Arizona State beat the A team. I don't care I've heard the stories. We had 8 players left. Guy got hurt. We're playing I don't care. B team beat the A team. That's all you need to know about it. Any other ones to shout out?
No, I mean, as a lifetime college B teamer when I was in college several eons ago, that one is near and dear to my heart. What about in Royan, France on beach? Didn't the Russian women's team beat the U.S.? I feel like that's a big one. I mean, that's a bit of a flip from 1980 hockey. Is this like the Miracle on Sand?
Fair. Yeah, the Miracle on Sand is actually, if a commentator could have really leaned into that for some great results. Another one that somebody pointed over in the Ulti World era is when GOAT beat Revolver in quarters in 2014. That's a pretty good
great one.
I don't know if it counts, but to me, the most legendary game in all of Ultimate should always be the 10-1 comeback, Fury over Riot. Is that an upset? If you're down 10-1, you're definitely the underdog. I don't know who was the underdog going into that game, but if you're down 10-1, you're a huge dog. I mean, we don't talk about that enough. To me, that is one of the most incredible things in all of sports I've ever heard. That is I cannot think of a similar, maybe there are a couple comebacks I can think of. That's being down, I don't know, 6-1 in hockey or like by like 40 in basketball. Like it's hard to think of another like a way to couch that into like another sport, but 10-1 is a ridiculous score to win a
Yeah,
game from hockey.
that's
I'm
being
sorry,
down six
especially
love,
the national championship.
6-0, 6-0, 5-0 in the third set, and coming back at Wimbledon. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Well, I hope that this show was as unbelievable, but not a comeback, because I hope that you expected nothing but the best coming from me and Edward. But that's going to wrap it up for this week's Deep Look. But do join us in the Discord for our subscriber bonus segment. We're going to be talking about players who made their name in semi-pro leagues. So if you want to be a part of that, you can join our subscriber group, hit us up in the Discord, and come be a part of the conversation and the podcast. So for Edward Stevens, I'm Keith Rayner, signing off for Deep Look. We will catch you next week. People don't know about them.